missed you guys. I know I just posted an episode last week, but it's actually been a long time since I recorded one because those were pre-recorded. I got about all of those episodes that have been posted before this one, pre-recorded, and this is the first one I'm actually recording prior to it being posted. And that's because I took a little break after the week break that we had because my mental health is really got to the lowest, I'd say. Hopefully there's not lower. I don't think so. We'll see. But I got to the point where I was just very, very tired and unmotivated, and I could not get myself to talk about anything on this podcast that would benefit you guys at all, apart from potentially maybe another rant episode, but I think you guys are good. And I don't know if you need any more of those since I just did one at the beginning of the season. And yeah, to stray away from subjects of that, because I feel like we've been talking a lot about kind of like mental health, mentality things, happiness, stuff that has to revolve around that. And something that I have not really talked much about, although this coincides kind of, is what I feel about our society and why I think that we're almost quote unquote rigged for failure when it comes down to how our society is set up. It's going to be a really interesting episode, and it's actually completely inspired by a conversation that I had with my boyfriend and that I continuously have with him all the time. Not in a negative way, but just because it's important to be aware, I think, of these things so that we can get an understanding of the control that we do have over ourselves and not dwell so much on the things that we don't have control over, which is how our society is built, unfortunately, unless, you are attempting to create movement and like actual difference in the world itself, the government, I'm not sure. But if you are anything like me and don't have that much power other than the influence potentially of others around you, then this is the most we can do, right? So there's a lot to touch on. There's a lot to talk about. But before that, I want you guys to check out the merch. I mention it at the beginning of every episode. So if you haven't checked it out by now, maybe today is the day that it'll happen, because we have some great hoodies, great shirts, great tote bags, things that you might potentially think are super, super cute. Everyone that I know in my life and circle that has purchased one have loved them. And me personally, obviously I'm going to love them. I made them. So if you guys want to go check that out, it's going to be in the show notes or the Instagram at Between You and Me podcast, or my main Instagram at _HeyIt'sAlex_XO. So getting right into the nitty and the gritty. Society creates extremely unrealistic expectations for success and achievement. And I think this is a really important subject to start off on, because if you guys go back and listen to my rant episode, which I was just talking to you guys about before, I think a big subject and a big thing that I was focused on in terms of what I was really worrying about and the issues that I was focusing on and that I was just beating myself up about was really the idea of success at the end of the day. And it was the idea of me being at a certain point in my life that I didn't feel like I was at yet. And where does that idea really come from? I think it comes from the way that society glorifies the epitome of success, the way that they show off success as the end all be all when it comes to your career. And we see that everywhere. And obviously what I'm going to be talking about most today is probably social media and the media in general, because I think that's what has the biggest pull on our society today and is almost like an anchor in our society itself too. You pull up Instagram on your phone, you pull up TikTok. And as a person like myself, I tune into content pretty often. One, because I'm creating content, so I'd look for inspiration, but two, just because I'm a victim of the scroll. I'm a victim of wanting to watch. I'm a victim of wanting to consume content all the time. It's a way to distract yourself. It's a way to entertain yourself. It's a way to get free dopamine during the day when maybe you just don't feel very content. For the most part, you're seeing beautiful people, number one, or two, successful people. People that have quote unquote grinded their whole life, right? Took their whole 20s or even their teenage years, didn't focus on their lives, didn't focus on, creating connections or being present or spending time with their family or friends. They just focused on themselves and focused on their work. And now they're successful, artists, they're actors, they're famous YouTubers, they're on top of like a CEO of their company, something, a doctor, a lawyer. And the way that social media glorifies that goes hand in hand with the way that society glorifies it. It creates a kind of pressure that us as consumers or us as just people in our day-to-day lives feel like we need to almost reach that level of success just in order to be as good as someone else. And even if that is not the first thought that comes in your head, it's definitely a subconscious thought that comes in your head. Because I know for a fact that I wouldn't feel all this pressure to be at a certain point in my life if I never had a screen in front of me. Or if my parents never had a screen in front of them. Because in turn, with me being on social media all day and seeing other people have successes, especially in the same career that I'm in, or my parents seeing things like, on Facebook, their cousins or their whoever have kids that are lawyers and doctors and this and that and whatever. And then in turn, I feel that kind of pressure as a person in my age range and a person that should be, according to everyone else, at a certain point in their lives. That's where all that pressure comes from. And it's because the way that social media has created this false perception of what success looks like can lead to a lot of comparison, and then also lead to people feeling like they're inadequate or like not where they should be in life, which is exactly how I felt. And it's important to consider how much outside sources and how much the way that our society has developed into what it is today actually plays a part in that. Because a lot of the times we get down about us as a single human being and think that we should have the most control over everything in our lives when, hey, guess what? We actually don't. And we also get down about negative feelings. We get down about feeling a certain way. Honestly, it's just like a never-ending negative cycle because one, you think, hey, I'm not at this point in my life. Two, you think, oh, I'm so sad that I'm not at this point in my life. And three, you think, oh, I'm annoyed that I'm sad right now. I'm annoyed that I'm feeling bad about myself. I'm annoyed that I'm not happy right now. And then it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And it's honestly a pretty good example of how my mental health has been going over the past couple months. It's like pressure from outside sources that kind of end up clinging into your mind and that you don't even realize that there's kind of a source to blame it on. And it's not yourself. You don't have to blame yourself for not being at a certain point. You don't have to blame yourself for not having what you want or need right now in your life because those negative feelings are coming elsewhere. They're coming from an outside source, an outside feeling of comparison, an outside feeling of not meeting the standards that you think you should meet, but it doesn't come from within you. We just internalize it to feel like that should be our opinions. That should be our perception of how we think about ourselves. That should be our drive to push us and work harder and have this success. And there's such a crazy emphasis on success in our society that if you do push yourself to that extent, it can lead to burnout. It can lead to you neglecting your self-care and your mental health. So it's like, you can't fucking win. You either work too hard or you don't work hard enough. And it's like, who tells us that? Who tells us that we have to be somewhere in our lives? Who tells us that we have to work that hard every day? Okay, important question to think about, huh? Now, if we even take it back a notch, take it back to when we were growing up, take it back to going to school. It's also interesting to think about how the education system can emphasize an element of competition over more collaboration, or even like teaching kids personal growth. I was talking about this with one of my friends too a couple of days ago. I guess I've been having a lot of like existential conversations recently. But the concept of how students aren't taught things about stuff that actually matters, about the human psyche, about creating relationships, about personal growth within yourself. This is shit that we have to end up learning ourselves. And then you reach your 20s and you're sitting there and you're confused and you're lost because you never got a chance to learn about yourself. Everything was so focused on, once again, success. When you're in school, there's such an emphasis on grades, right? I mean, I know for the most part, conversations in school, whether outside of, social life, would be about what grade did you get? Like, what did you pass in this class? What'd you get on your finals? What'd you get on your SATs? People love to compare. They love this element of competition. You want to be the best. You want to do the best you can in your class. Why? So you can get into the best university. Why? So you can get the best job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it also creates a really lack mindset for kids growing up, because there's this idea that there's really limited opportunities for people, which means that you have to have competition between everyone. There's only so many doctors that can be in the world. And even just thinking about how competitive it is to become a doctor, get into med school, you have to be the best. If you want something, you have to be the best. You can't focus on any other portion of your life if you want to have success in that certain aspect. And that's when it can get really, really challenging and also kind of sad for students, because they kind of build education based on separating people. And if you want to be the best, you have to separate yourself from everybody else. And you need to kind of be a lone wolf and work to the hardest of your abilities to get where you want to be, instead of focusing on developing yourself as an actual child throughout high school or whatever. And you miss out on things that are, I'd like to say, relatively fucking important to be an adult in our society. So, yes, there is a very, very big lack of emphasis on skills that are actually important in life, like, I don't know, communication, emotional intelligence, which is actually going to get you further, I think, as a human being, and as a human being and your own happiness and peace, right? Like, success doesn't mean peace. Success also doesn't mean happiness. And I think a lot of the times people, when they're chasing success or chasing high paid jobs or chasing this kind of lifestyle that they dreamed for themselves, they also think in turn they're chasing happiness. But, we all know the sob story of being the richest person in the world but having no one around you to share it with. So that just kind of goes to show the emphasis on achievement and success in education and in careers over any kind of personal fulfillment or personal satisfaction in your own life, which I think a lot of us get to a point in our lives, or maybe not, I don't know, but a lot of us get to a point in our lives where we realize what's more important to us. And 10 out of 10 times, people are going to choose self-fulfillment, self-happiness. And I guess it depends on you when you get to the point that you realize that's more important to you than success. Now, jumping back into careers and jobs and things, it seems like it's the only focus in life for the most part. It's one of the biggest subjects in conversation. It's also one of the biggest self-fulfilling prophecies, but I literally don't even know if that makes sense. What I'm trying to say is it's one of the biggest self-defining aspects of you is your job and what you do in your life. And I internalize that to such a high degree. Why? Again, we can place the blame on our society, unfortunately, because it really just does come from that. Because at the end of the day, it's what people choose to be their biggest asset, I guess, or be their biggest personality trait or be their biggest part of themselves is what they decide to do with their lives. And it can very much define who you are as a person. And struggling to actually get into the career that you want to get into can create a lot of negativity and can really, really change your outlook on yourself because it's the way that a lot of people define themselves. The job market is really competitive. I'm sure a lot of you guys are in the age range where you're trying to find your big girl job, big boy job. And it's really difficult. It's really, really, really hard to get into a position that you want to be in, something that fulfills you, something that you feel passionate about, something that is fun, but also challenging, but also something that you feel like you can succeed in. And there's just so many categories and variables in jobs that people put to almost like the highest degree in their life. Like they need to check this box, this box, this box for them to be content with their job. So having extremely limited job opportunities right now and a high amount of people that are actually trying to get these positions. There's also crazy qualifications that you need for these positions and even for entry-level positions. And there's also need for such a high level of experience, which is like, okay, cool. They're entry-level jobs, but you need a crazy level of experience. And also it's really difficult for graduates or people who are looking for different careers to even make it into these positions. So a lot of people are left lost. They're left questioning themselves as people for not being good enough to get into a certain position, when this all tracks back to how success is literally the narrative of the world to be the most important thing that you should be chasing in your life. When that is the most important thing that our society tells us about ourselves, and it becomes one of the most challenging things to do in your life, what does that equal? A plus B equals C. It equals unhappiness. It equals being stuck in this cycle of negativity because you're chasing something and having a really hard time getting there. So you're chasing an idea of something that our society tells you to chase. And you're not actually thinking for yourself for the most part. And I could be over analyzing it a bit, but also it's very personal to me, like how I'm speaking, because these are how my thoughts have been over like probably a couple of years, to be honest, since I've been out of school. So it's like I can relate so clearly to that thought process and that mindset, which only leads me to believe a lot of other people probably have the same mindset due to how our society's built, because we are one and the same, you know? We all have the same inner voice telling us we need to be somewhere or do something with ourselves or create this type of life for ourselves, especially at this age, once you get to this like age range where you want to create a life for yourself. And it can become really, really challenging and almost take over your mental health because everything that I fucking talked about. We don't learn things about our mental health. We don't learn, skills that we need to be able to take care of ourselves, grow ourselves, be better people. So at this age now, we're trying to be better people. We're trying to be more aware of our mental health. We're trying to be more content in ourselves. And simultaneously, we are trying to be better. We're trying to chase success. We're trying to, be the best version of ourselves we can possibly be. And that's a lot to put on a human being. I'd say a developmental? Sure. At a developmental, it doesn't sound right to me, but you know what I'm saying. At that age, it's hard. I think we can all agree on that if you guys are relating to any of this. Now, I haven't even scratched the surface on how many people can have disadvantages in the way society has built us to chase success, career, and money. A lot of people, simply based on a lot of systemic issues, are at an extreme limitation and disadvantage to gaining any kind of success whatsoever for so many reasons. Limited access to quality education or even getting the job training that they need, or obviously financial resources. A lot of people need to put money into things to make money. A lot of people don't have basic needs, transportation, housing. A lot of people don't have the ability to network, which I forgot to even mention before when it comes to jobs and careers and success. Sometimes the people that are the most successful only gain that success through networking, meaning you're only at a certain position in your life because you know somebody who can get you to that position in your life, because you're born into a family, or you made friends with somebody, or you were able to just strike some luck somehow, end up in a circle that could help you succeed because other people around you are successful already. So it's like, that's a whole nother ballpark of needing to be in an environment that can help breed success, and like completely disregarding actually genuine relationships with people because you're creating relationships strictly for success. It's kind of another sticky subject, and another negative outlook of how society has taught us to like make relationships strictly for success. Of course, if you're a person in these positions as well, it is extremely hard to even understand like how to get to the place where everybody else is, or the people that you see on TV, or the people you see in social media. And that can be such a fucking burden. That can be such a burden to even put yourself in that mindset and realize that you're at a disadvantage and you have to work twice or 3 times or 4 times as hard as the average person just to get to that point. Also, I don't want to get too deep, but we all know the obvious: the discrimination, biases, systemic issues that harm people in the hiring process or the promotion process. So, of course, we have a lot of people who are at disadvantages in a world that is working for only certain people to reach success. Now, going back to social media and kind of like pinpointing on this a little bit more, there's a lot of ways that social media can harm people's mental health and can harm the way that people perceive themselves. And in a lot of ways, it's an extension of society, like I talked about. It's a emphasis on how society has been structured. And I feel like social media is just like a manifestation of it, but it's also a heightened version of it, because now we get to tune into I don't want to say corrupt, but I'm going to say corrupt way that society has kind of pressured us into success. And also, how I mentioned before, the standard of beauty. And you turn your phone on, you scroll through TikTok, you either see beautiful people or successful people. And beauty also breeds success, right? So when it comes to beauty standards, I've talked about this in like a social media episode before, but that is probably one of the most harmful narratives that is pushed in our society, unfortunately, because it's like there's too much importance on it. There's too much importance on being beautiful or looking a certain way. And then there's also the people who are on the complete opposite side of the spectrum who preach beauty in every single human being. It doesn't matter how you look. It doesn't matter who you are beautiful. But there's also an issue in that, in my mind. And I don't want to be really controversial. I feel like this topic might be taken in a controversial way, but it's genuinely not. It's kind of just my opinion on how everything kind of looks like in my eyes. My eyes have been widened, let me tell you, just simply from talking about this so much, and also being in a very low state of mind and reflecting on it and thinking about like, where do these feelings come from, and thoughts and beliefs, right? And thinking about beauty and thinking about, oh, everyone's beautiful, everyone's this, everyone's that. It's like, who cares? Who cares? Why is beauty so important is the real question. Why do you need to be so stunning and so beautiful and so perfect? And why do you need to be, no matter how you look, you have to be gorgeous, Like, of course, I can't take away from the fact that it is a nice message to spread that everyone is beautiful, of course. But it's also counteractive in a certain way, because it places too much importance on the idea of beauty when at the end of the day, that's something that we've created for ourselves. Another interesting thing to think about is how much the media perpetuates this like annoying and unrealistic standard for beauty, for success, for love is a big one that I haven't even talked about. Oof, I just thought about that one. Love is such a crazy subject, which I feel like I talk about more. My episode on chasing love definitely expands into this subject a lot more if you guys want to listen to that. But it's talked about, spoken about, shown in the media to such a crazy extent, which is also like, why is it so important? Society kind of puts us in a box, tells us what's important, and tells us to go and focus our lives in these aspects. So if you guys think about it in this way, and then take a look at yourself and think, what am I doing in my day-to-day life? Or how am I going about my life in like the grand scheme of things in a way that is influenced by society and not really coming from me, myself, and I, you know? It's being influenced from an outside source, and we are all victims to that type of influence. So I'm not saying like shame on you for being influenced by it, but I'm saying it's important to recognize that you could be, that you're potentially wired in a certain way to believe certain things, like craving this type of success, or craving the biggest love of your life, or craving to be the most beautiful because of an outside source, which is what we hear every single day in the media, what we hear from other people around us, what we talk about every day, how we think about ourselves, and so on and so forth. So it's really important to kind of step back, reflect, realize that the world is structured in a certain way for us to, unfortunately, be unhappy. Be unhappy with ourselves for the most part, and be unhappy with the way that our lives are going. So I think it's a lot easier said than done to kind of step out of society's narrative on how everyday people should be living their lives. So of course, this whole entire episode wasn't going to be me bashing on the world, talking about how fucking negative it is, talking about how we're rigged for failure, talking about how we're rigged to be unhappy, because would that really be a between you and me episode? Of course it wouldn't. I'm going to put a spin on it. I'm going to put a spin on how you can maybe change perspectives, or put yourself in a different mindset, or start listening to you instead of outside sources, like what literally everybody else is telling you that you need to do in your life. And I think that this is going to be a lifelong, it sounds kind of depressing, but I think this is going to be a lifelong reminder to ourselves, because there's nothing, like I said, that we can actually do to snap our fingers and change how society tells us to live our lives. But there's a lot of things that we can do within ourselves to make sure that we're really pursuing an honest life that is for us and not for anybody else, or not to meet anybody else's standards. So I guess this kind of revolves around inner work and really, really, really reflecting on determining what's actually important to you in your life. And if it's literally living the most simple, calm, and peaceful life, then go and fucking do that. If that's what you value, then go and do that. Because you have to focus on things that are important to you rather than trying to conform to the way that society expects you to want to be. Like I said, you have to practice a lot of self-reflection, identify your values, your goals, your passions. This also goes back to the episode of living and surviving. It's also really important to have a kind of plan for achieving the goals that you want. It doesn't matter what they are. It doesn't even have to be career-based, you know what I mean? So really looking and striving to have that kind of goal and aspirations for yourself, because that's just how human beings are built. I don't think it's negative to have goals and aspirations or to work towards something. I think what is negative is the idea of success and how people perceive success as the end all and be all. It's not bad to want to be successful or to want to have a certain passion or career in your life. But also consider that you don't have to fit into the boxes. You don't have to fit into the traditional job or career or way of living that we see in the media or in other people's lives. And it's okay to go out of the box and stray from what's normal in our society. It's also really important to just surround yourself with good people. Surround yourself with people who encourage you, who hopefully have the same mindset as you, because the people around you will make a big difference in the way that you think about yourself and how you choose to pursue different things in your life. I think it's so, so important for the rest of your eternity. Sounds kind of dramatic, but for a lot of different scenarios in your life, to challenge the things that society tells you. Challenge what beliefs you have about yourself or about the way that people should just be, and start educating yourself on things that actually matter, things that are actually important in the world. Also, of course, I'm always going to talk about prioritizing yourself, prioritizing your self-care, your mental health. I think the overarching message of this whole entire episode was kind of for me to describe to you guys how much of an impact society makes on a negative mentality, how they kind of breed people who end up with high amounts of anxiety or high amounts of depression because they can't live up to these standards that people make for each other. And they can't live up to the standards that society makes for each other. It's so easy to be wrapped up in negativity when it's kind of what we hear every day and it's what we get to think about ourselves every day because we don't live up to certain standards, like I said. So think about that. That also goes back to challenging your thoughts. That also goes back to every fucking point I made in this whole entire episode. And that's really why I wanted to talk about this, because it's something that I've realized has played such a big part in the way that I think and feel about myself all the fucking time, because I have these crazy expectations or even just thoughts that are stuck in my subconscious about who I should be. That really challenges your own mental health. And me as a person that already struggles with mental health, it's like that on top of everything else that I have to be as a human being is an insane amount of pressure. And to alleviate some of that pressure in your own life, because you can understand that the pressure itself comes from something else and not you. Just remember that everybody is on a different path. We have extremely unique people in this world, and we have a lot of people that tend to think there's a right way to go when there really isn't. We're all trying to lead fulfilling lives. We're all trying to find something somewhere when there is everything that you need inside of yourself if you take the time to find it. This was a weird episode, I can't lie. I'm finishing it and I'm kind of like, have question marks in my mind if I even was able to express this to the best of my ability. I don't know if you guys can relate to how you have so many thoughts in your mind and you haven't maybe developed all the thoughts yet to be able to express them perfectly in words, but this is definitely a newer subject that I'm speaking about. So it was a little brave of me to talk about it without having as much time to really internalize my own opinions. But what is this podcast for other than for me to rant about certain things in life? I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope it wasn't too out of the blue, out of the box for you guys to listen to. If you got anything from it, then I'm happy. If you didn't, come back and listen to it in a year. I don't know. Maybe don't. It's completely up to you. But yeah, thank you. I love you. And I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Talk to you in the next episode. Bye.